Who were you before esports?
Just a bald man making my way through the world. Let's see.
Making
from Boston,
my way downtown.
Making my way in the world today. From Cheers, Boston. I actually lived right across the street from Cheers. You ever been to Cheers in Boston?
No.
It's super disappointing.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone even remembers what Cheers is, but the Cheers show, right? They'd go down the stairs and then you'd enter the bar, and it's an amazing thing. And so the stairs is legit, but then nothing else is the same. So all the tourists are like, "Cheers!" It's on the stop, and they get off and they go down the stairs. They're like,
"It's a regular ass bar.
There's nothing.
It's not as big as Cheers used to be a very popular show in the 1980s. For all you little ones, we're boomers
yeah,
here.
Exactly. So I'm from Boston originally, and was a Boston kid, loved sports, loved everything Boston, moved out to California 10 years ago now, up in Palo Alto area when I started a company that we sold to Apple and went to go work for Apple.
Okay. Tell me about that company. Because was that your first company?
No. So I had...
Give me your entrepreneurial...
entrepreneurial. So went to college, fun, didn't do much, did well enough to get into law school, went to Boston College Law School, loved it, surprisingly. Only went to law school because I didn't know what else to do. My dad was like, "You should specialize in something. You should be a lawyer." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I took all these classes that had like contracts and sports law, thinking I'd get into sports. And then I did really well in law school, like, shocker. I was the guy that people didn't want to have in their study group or anything because I just wasn't the really intellectual, into jurisprudence of being a lawyer. I just kind of went to law school. But somehow when the test came around, I did like exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And so if you do exceptionally well your first year in law school, you get recruited by all the big law firms. So all of a sudden I got recruited by all these big law firms, and I was like, hey, and so I got to pick whatever I wanted. And by the way, I got married at the same time, like right out of law school. Super young, as you would say. Yeah, Wendy. So 23, 24. And so like, I better get a real job. So I picked the law firm that represented the Red Sox and the Patriots because that's how, intellectual I was about my career.
Yeah.
Not knowing that if you're the low man on the totem pole as a first year lawyer, you're never touching anything having to do with the Patriots or the Red Sox. So I went in there and I hated it. I just hated every bit of it. And I wasn't a good lawyer, and I got fired after like 11 months. I wasn't the only one because it was rough times. It was like a recession. They got rid of a lot of the first year lawyers and the second year lawyers. But I was like, wow, this sucks. I don't really want to be a lawyer. What am I going to do? So I sort of hung around the MIT Media Lab, the famous MIT Media Lab. So the MIT Media Lab, for those of you who don't know, is like all these amazing startups have come out of there. It's an innovation lab, smartest kids and engineers in the world. They go there, they apply to get in there, and they have projects that are way out in the future. And if you hang around there, maybe you can hook up with somebody and do something. So ended up hooking up with a professor and a student and another guy who was doing like interactive TV. And I thought it was super cool. And they were like, hey, why don't you help with the business plan? So I did that. And this was Internet 1.0, where it was pretty easy to raise money, and we still couldn't raise money because we were kids and we didn't really know what we were doing. But somehow I got introduced to a guy who brought like 20 friends together and said, I don't know about your business plan, but I like you, Andy, so I'll back you. And they all gave me like $50,000 or $100,000, can't remember.
Yeah.
So we had money, and we started a business, and that was kind of my get out of being a lawyer and move over to being a businessman.
At that point, did you know what the business was, and how did you present it to?
I presented it that we licensed the technology that this student developed at MIT for interactive TV. The reality was, it was really neat technology, but there was no real business around it. And we had a professor behind us, and we got Nicholas Negroponte, the famous founder of the Media Lab, to invest. So it looked good. And now back then, when everyone was investing in, pets.com or whatever it was people thought it was a gold rush with the internet. And so what we were going to do was create an interactive layer over television where you could interact. And it was actually supposed to be commerce. Like if you were watching Friends and you liked, whatever back then, what Phoebe was wearing or something, you can click on it and buy it. And it was this neat kind of tracking technology. But for me, it was learning business, and I ended up negotiating the license with the Media Lab with MIT because I was a lawyer, with that 11 months of experience. So that was a good one. So that helped. I just started learning and then really coming out of my shell and being more aggressive, and then I ended up going to everybody, to ABC, NBC, Food Network, PBS, and I asked them all for content to be part of a trial, and somehow they all gave it to me. I mean, everybody gave me their content, and we wrote scripts, and we created an interactive TV trial, and it was great. And then after that, we just didn't know what to do with the business. We ended up selling the technology to another startup, and that ended up sort of really helping my path. On one level, the technology is still being used. Like, I think a lot of it's used in the red zone for NFL, where they switch off, like a switching technology, which is kind of neat that we made something like a couple decades ago, whatever it was, and it's still being used.
Yeah.
But what happened was I joined another startup, and they said, hey, we're getting into this thing called SMS. Do you know what it is? And I'm like, no. They're like, well, we want you to go to England, and SMS, which is text messaging, short message service. It wasn't called text messaging then. It's really big in Europe. Go check it out, because we think we want to bring it to the United States.
Yeah.
So I went over there, and I learned a bunch about it, and I came back, and my entrepreneurial bug was going, and it turns out that one of my closer friends, who now you know, our board member and my business partner, Jeff Glass, had an SMS company in the United States, and it was a company that was all about mobile marketing. So the idea was that you could walk by Starbucks and you'd get a coupon or something back then.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he's like, hey, why don't you, so we started talking, and he's like, you sold your company. I sold it for nothing, really, just some stock or something, which I never expected to get anything from. But I love being my own boss and an entrepreneur, and I could never go work for another big company, although ended up, working for Apple. And he said, why don't you come work with me at my SMS company? And I said, well, I don't really think your plan's going to work. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, I don't think people want to just have their phone light up and get a coupon. And he's like, well, then you tell me what our business model should be, because he was kind of struggling as well. Yeah. But he had a bunch of money. So he hired me. I went to this this trade show, this convention, in the second week of the job, which was one of the first CTIA, the cellular telephone industry. It's a huge thing, right? And I learned a whole ton, and I came back, and I was like totally inspired. Like, I think I have a business plan.
Yeah.
And so I told him, he's like, what's the plan? I said, we're just going to connect with all these carriers, and we're going to run everybody else's messages, because text messaging is going to be big, and people are going to want to buy stuff, whether it's ringtones or horoscopes or MTV clips or baseball alerts, all the things we take for granted now, which didn't exist.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's a really fucking good idea, because we had a bunch of the infrastructure. He's like, but how do we charge people? Because everything we've built here was to be free, like a coupon. I was like, well, you figure that out. And Jeff's like, okay, I'll figure that out. You go get me some customers. So this is sort of where the legend of Andy began, in a way, where I went out and I had all these meetings. I flew all over the place. You know how I kind of roll. And I came back, and we had a board meeting the next day. And I said to Jeff, he's like, okay, dude, the board meeting's tomorrow. Like, you've got to, I don't even know what we're doing. What are you going to tell them? Do you have a customer who can be like our, every business needs like a trial customer, right? A reference customer. I said, I have 50 customers. And Jeff's like, you don't have 50 customers. Don't embarrass me and go in and say we have 50 customers for a business that doesn't exist. I said, dude, I can get them. I can get 50. He's like, please don't say that. Say you can get one. I said, how about 3? He's like, just say one and pick your best one, and we'll start that way and we'll go. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you're not going to, are you? I said, I'm with it. He's like, please don't embarrass me. No one is going to give you any credibility. You have zero track record in this world. You sold a company for nothing. I was like, okay, cool. So we go into the board meeting, and it's like one of my first board meetings, and you know how they are, right? And so like, okay, Andy, get up there. And everyone's all dressed up. I'm not dressed up. And they're like, okay, so where's your slide? And I said, I don't really have a slide for the deck here. I just thought I'm going to talk to you what we want to do. So I explained what we want to do, and they're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I said, this is why it's going to work. And when I get into something, I talk like a mile a minute. I just get super passionate about it. So they were leaning forward, and they're like, okay, do we have Jeff's like, so tell us about our reference customer. I said, I think we have a reference customer. I think actually we can get Univision and Playboy as our customers. Right.
Big boys.
Big boys, Univision and Playboy.
Yeah.
Playboy was actually something back there. And Playboy wasn't a dumb idea, because as we know, that industry is where all this sort of innovation comes from, micro payments and all these other things. They're like, wow, those are 2 really big customers. And then I couldn't control myself. I said, I actually have 48 other customers I think I can get.
Jesus.
And just like, please. And they're like, Andy. I was like, yeah, I think we can get all of them. And they're like, well, that's crazy. Do you want to list them? I said, yeah, actually, I printed them out. So I handed them all out, and they said, okay, look, of these 50, what's the probability at 50% of getting, 10? I said, 100%. I said,
oh my God.
How many are we going to get? I said, we're going to get 50. They're like, we're not going to get 50. They said, okay. I go, guys, what do you want me to say? We're going to get 49? I said, we're going to get these. I guarantee you. We have them.
Jesus,
and
confidence.
It's like, well, I will give you a huge bonus if you can get 50. But if you don't get 50, what are you going to give us? I was like, fine, I'll give back half my salary. They're like, okay, done. I was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to get these 50 and put my name out here, but this company better have an infrastructure to support these 50 because I'm not on that side of the business.
Yeah.
And so Jeff was stuck at this point. He's like, yes, we've already talked about this. So if you get 50, we'll be there ready for you. I was like, okay. So we get out of there and Jeff's like, dude, really? I was like, we're the only ones who are doing this. We already have half the connections. All you got to do is get me AT&T as a connection. We'll get everybody. He's like, we're not going to walk in and get AT&T. I said, we're going to do it. Long story short, we got all 50. And they were all way bigger than we thought.
Yeah.
And we went from...
So what exactly was the service that you were
providing? We were carrying text messaging. We were allowing you
When you say you're carrying, what do you mean?
We were the infrastructure. So these carriers, being AT&T, Singular, Sprint, they didn't have infrastructure to handle...
What is infrastructure?
Infrastructure like the hardware, the software, the system to say, I requested a text message from you, you send me back a text message. Because what happened was, for the kids out there, if you were on AT&T and I was on T-Mobile, we couldn't even text each other. That was called interoperability.
Yes.
Right. So we connected all the carriers together, said we'll run it all, and we're going to do billing as well. So if you want those shitty ringtones for $9.99 a month, that's a total rip-off subscription, we'll carry that for you. If you want the baseball alerts, right, to get the scores to find out the Red Sox won, we'll carry that for you for 99 cents. So we did all that stuff. And the creme de la creme and the biggest problem of the whole thing, I got another deal on top of it all that we couldn't resist. It was for a brand new show, which we didn't think there'd be a lot of voting and text messaging for, called American Idol. American Idol.
Wait, so let me get this straight.
Yes.
Okay, you and your company with Jeff Glass, who's
our little tiny startup,
who's a hoot, by the way.
He's a brilliant guy.
Yeah, brilliant guy, and also a good time. You guys created a company that would carry all of the text messages from AT&T, Verizon. So let's call AT&T had 100 million customers with phones, and they all texted simultaneously. You created that.
Kind of. Not for personal use. Not for like, hey, are you coming home? Hey, are you coming home? For business. Anything people wanted to run.
Buy and stuff.
Like alerts, gossip, voting, for corporation, really, for companies. But
so couldn't resist American Idol. Holy shit.
Yeah,
all right.
So we got American Idol. We had no idea how big it was. We never heard of it, right? How big it was going to be. It was called like Pop Idol or something in England. And that was all free messaging as well, right? And so it started and we couldn't handle it at all. And my next sort of, my co-founder of my next business, Ishwar, who was the chief technology officer, he was like, dude, you totally fucked us here. Everyone hated me. Everybody, I'd come to work and I couldn't even look people in the eye. They were sleeping over every day. There was at least 20 engineers every night. We'd build more infrastructure, add more boxes, make more software. Things would go down. People's vote wouldn't count. People would lose their messages. It was so bad. But we were the only game in town for a while. And so we just kept picking up market share. And it was like, I remember having my meetings with my staff. So they'd start at 11:30 at night. We do 11:30, 12:30, and 1:30 because the whole rest of the day was just bananas. And eventually we kind of figured it out. But boy, we pissed off. Like Major League Baseball, they hated us. They made Jeff fly in to meet with Bowman, who's still the head of Major League Baseball Advanced Media. And Jeff's like, I've never had anyone rip me one like that guy did before. And all I could say was like, I'm sorry. And in my head was like, fuck you, Andy, for doing this. But long story short, the business had zero revenue first year, zero revenue the second year when I joined. Mm-hmm. $5 million the next year, all of it in December, $85 million the next year, and sold the business for $270 million to VeriSign.
To VeriSign.
Yes.
Okay, so that's your first.
That's the first
business,
and then the big one I left right away.